The Lutz family arrived at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, with a sense of cautious optimism. George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, Missy, Joey, and Daniel, had recently relocated from a cramped city apartment, seeking a fresh start, a new home in which the children could grow up surrounded by space and nature. The house, a large Dutch colonial with high ceilings and expansive rooms, seemed perfect. Its white clapboard exterior, neatly trimmed lawns, and stately architecture suggested stability, comfort, and security. From the beginning, however, there was something unsettling about the house. George Lutz, moving boxes into the expansive living room, felt a sudden chill that lingered despite the summer heat. The air seemed heavier than it should be, and shadows appeared sharper in the corners of the room. Kathy noticed the large fireplace in the living room, but something about its darkened hearth made her uneasy, as if it were more than a simple feature of the house, as if it were a threshold to something unseen. At first, the disturbances were subtle. George reported waking at precisely 3:15 a.m. every night, unable to move or speak, staring at the ceiling as if unseen eyes were watching him. Doors creaked open with no wind to explain the movement. Cold drafts appeared in isolated spots, chilling the family even during warm days. Missy and Joey complained of strange noises in the night, footsteps in the hall, faint whispers that seemed to echo their names. The house, though beautiful and spacious, was alive with a presence that could not be ignored. The first truly alarming event occurred in the early days of occupancy. George awoke to find a green slime oozing from the walls of his bedroom, a viscous, unnatural substance that defied explanation. The smell was acrid, almost metallic, and the texture was sticky and cold to the touch. Despite attempting to clean it, the substance reappeared, spreading across the walls as though the house itself exuded it. The family recoiled in fear, realizing that the disturbances were not merely auditory or psychological, but now physical and undeniable. Objects began to move on their own. Doors slammed violently, sometimes so hard they shook the entire structure. Chairs tipped over, books fell from shelves, and lights flickered without electrical cause. The children reported seeing shadows at the foot of their beds, tall, humanoid shapes with indistinct features, while the adults felt an oppressive weight pressing down in certain rooms. The house was no longer just inhabited by the Lutz family. It had claimed them as witnesses to its malevolent activity. George's waking at 3:15 a.m. became a nightly ritual of terror. Each morning, he would awaken drenched in sweat, heart racing, feeling as if invisible hands had gripped him in the night. He tried to rationalize it, stress from the move, adjustment to a new home. But the consistency, intensity, and accompanying phenomena defied explanation. The other family members began experiencing similar disturbances. Doors that had been locked were found ajar. Cabinets opened on their own. The children insisted they saw figures watching from corners, their whispers audible in moments of stillness. One night, George awoke to find a shadowy figure levitating above him, its edges indistinct, its presence oppressive and threatening. He felt paralyzed, unable to cry out, frozen in place as the shape hovered silently before vanishing into the darkness. Kathy, awake in the adjoining room, reported hearing voices that spoke in languages she did not understand, guttural and mocking, yet clearly intelligent. The children, too, were no longer safe. They screamed at shadows that moved independently of light, objects that flew without contact, and whispers that seemed to respond to their fears. The family sought help from local authorities, clergy, and paranormal investigators. Police officers who visited the house reported cold spots, doors slamming with no discernible cause, and an overwhelming feeling of dread. One officer described the sensation of being observed, of invisible eyes tracking every movement. Investigators documented flying objects, unexplained noises, and temperature anomalies. Audio equipment captured faint, distorted voices, sometimes calling out family names. Cameras revealed shadows shifting against walls, shapes that could not be attributed to light or reflection. Kathy and George attempted protective measures. They sprinkled salt around rooms, placed crucifixes in prominent locations, and recited prayers daily. At times, the disturbances seemed to pause, as if acknowledging their efforts, only to return with renewed intensity once attention waned. Doors slammed with greater force, objects hurled themselves across rooms, and green slime continued to ooze from walls, spreading mysteriously in areas untouched by human hands. The psychological toll was immense. Sleep deprivation led to anxiety, irritability, and fear that permeated every waking moment. The children were terrified to sleep alone, while the adults experienced near constant vigilance. Even simple tasks, like eating dinner or reading in the living room, were disrupted by sudden slamming doors, shifting furniture or objects appearing where none had been placed. The home that once promised safety and comfort had become a crucible of terror. George, desperate for explanation, consulted priests and paranormal experts. Some suggested the house was cursed, or that residual energy from a violent past lingered within its walls. Others speculated poltergeist activity, influenced perhaps by emotional energy, although no rational cause could explain the green slime, levitation, or precise targeting of objects. The house had become a stage for events that were both physical and psychological, intelligent and unpredictable, defying both science and reason. As the days passed, the activity escalated further. Doors slammed continuously, often in patterns that seemed deliberate, almost communicative. Green slime reappeared in increasingly unusual locations. Furniture moved with intention, sometimes narrowly missing family members. Voices were heard in every corner, taunting, pleading, and commanding, often speaking directly to individual family members. The children reported seeing glowing orbs, shadowy figures, and movements that defied natural explanation. The family realized they were no longer safe anywhere within the house. Every room, every corner, every hallway had become a potential site of attack or intimidation. The notoriety of the house grew quickly. Local newspapers picked up on the reports, and soon the story of the Lutz family's nightmares spread beyond Amityville. Paranormal investigators and journalists visited, hoping to document and understand the unprecedented activity. They observed doors opening and closing without cause, objects levitating or flying across rooms, and green slime appearing on walls with no clear source. Audio recordings captured whispers, voices, and unidentifiable sounds, some intelligible, some distorted. Despite the mounting evidence, skepticism persisted. Critics argued that stress, hysteria, or exaggeration might explain the phenomena. Yet the Lutz family maintained detailed records. Daily journals documenting events, sketches mapping disturbances, photographs, and audio recordings. Their consistency, corroborated by visiting investigators, strengthened the credibility of their claims. The house was not merely the setting for fear. It was an active participant in terror, its intelligence and intent unmistakable. Over the course of 28 days, the family endured relentless phenomena. George continued waking at 3:15 a.m. Green slime appeared unpredictably. Doors slammed, voices spoke, and shadows prowled. The children remained terrified, waking in the night with screams and pleading for safety. The family was psychologically exhausted, emotionally drained, and physically intimidated by a presence they could neither see fully nor repel effectively. By the end of their stay, the Lutz family vacated the house, leaving behind the Dutch colonial and its history of horror. Their experience became legendary, inspiring books, films, and countless retellings of the Amityville Horror. The events at 112 Ocean Avenue remain one of the most famous hauntings in history, cited as a case where the intersection of physical phenomena, psychological terror, and intelligent disturbance created a story that continues to captivate, frighten, and mystify. Even decades later, The Lutz family's account remains the benchmark for American hauntings. A family terrorized nightly, green slime dripping inexplicably, doors slamming without cause, levitation, and voices that spoke with intelligence and intent. The house that was meant to be a home became a laboratory of fear, a site where ordinary life was overridden by the extraordinary, and a story that defined the very notion of a haunted house. The Amityville Horror endures not only as a tale of terror, but as a cultural touchstone, a story that challenges the boundaries of belief, tests the resilience of a family, and continues to inspire both fear and fascination. The house may remain at 112 Ocean Avenue, its walls silently remembering the month that changed the Lutz family forever, and its legacy forever etched into the annals of paranormal history. As the days at 112 Ocean Avenue wore on, the disturbances intensified. What began as subtle chills, creaks, and unexplained noises evolved into a relentless, almost malevolent force that consumed the family's daily life. George Lutz awoke at 3:15 a.m. every night, his body stiff, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, yet unable to cry out. He could feel an oppressive presence leaning over him, pressing on his chest, leaving him gasping for air, paralyzed in fear. He tried reasoning with himself, stress, relocation, imagination, yet the phenomenon was neither sporadic nor explainable. Each night, the terror repeated with ritualistic precision. Kathy Lutz experienced her own harrowing encounters. One night, while preparing breakfast in the kitchen, she felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The air grew cold, and she heard a guttural, distorted voice calling her name from the hallway. She turned to see shadows pooling in corners, elongating unnaturally, then retreating as she moved closer. When she tried to dismiss it as fatigue, a green, viscous substance seeped from the walls, coating her fingertips and leaving a foul odor. Panic gripped her. The house was no longer simply haunted. It was attacking, threatening, and asserting control. The children's terror became increasingly pronounced. Missy, Joey, and Daniel reported seeing tall figures with indistinct faces standing silently in doorways, watching, waiting, moving when unobserved. Objects flew across rooms with precision, narrowly missing them. Their toys would topple, and doors slammed in succession, seemingly communicating some unseen intention. Missy's small frame trembled at night as whispers circled her bed, sometimes naming each child individually, sometimes mocking them. Sleep was no longer possible. The family could not find sanctuary in any corner of the house. George's sense of reality began to fracture. One night, he witnessed a lamp levitate above his head, tilting and spinning before crashing to the floor with such force it left a dent in the hardwood. He recoiled, realizing that the house itself was capable of interacting with the family in ways that defied logic. Kathy experienced levitation as well. Objects and even chairs lifted slightly from the ground, then hurled toward walls or ceilings. The presence seemed playful at times, cruel at others, and always intelligent. It observed, tested, and manipulated. Doors and windows became focal points of terror. They slammed with deliberate force, sometimes in rapid succession, sometimes timed to correspond with family movements. The family began to notice patterns. The disturbances intensified during moments of attention, only to subside briefly when ignored, as if the house learned to respond to observation. Every room was affected, every hallway a potential site of attack. The house was no longer a safe environment. It had become a sentient trap, a space designed to instill fear and assert dominance. In addition to physical disturbances, the house manifested psychological aggression. Voices, at first faint and distorted, became louder, mocking, and personalized. They addressed individual family members directly, often in languages or tones foreign to the listeners. Kathy reported hearing her own voice distorted, repeating prayers she had whispered only minutes before, twisted into guttural mockery. George heard commands, threats, and taunts, challenging his courage and authority. The children heard names, phrases, and sentences that conveyed intent, as if the presence were actively communicating with them. Investigators and clergy were summoned repeatedly. Paranormal experts noted unusual cold spots, unusual electromagnetic readings, and objects moving with intelligence. Priests attempted blessings, but even religious rituals seemed to have limited effect. Candles flickered violently, crucifixes were ignored, and the green slime continued to manifest unpredictably, seeping from walls and spreading in a manner that suggested awareness. Investigators were unnerved, describing an environment that defied all known laws of physics and human comprehension. One particularly harrowing incident involved George and Kathy alone in the living room. The air thickened, a low hum vibrating through the floorboards. Chairs toppled toward them, only stopping inches from impact. A shadow, tall and vaguely humanoid, stretched from the far corner, moving closer with unnatural fluidity. George attempted to speak, to assert control, but the figure seemed to mock him, tilting and retreating in synchronization with his gestures. The room's temperature dropped sharply, and a faint green mist began to ooze from the walls. Both were paralyzed with fear, the presence dominating every sense, every thought. The children's rooms were no refuge. Missy's bed shook violently as objects fell from shelves. Joey's toys were hurled across the room, narrowly missing his head. Daniel reported shadows hovering over him at night, moving closer whenever he tried to sit up. Sleep deprivation led to hysteria, tears, and screaming. The family huddled together, seeking physical and emotional protection, but the presence seemed unrelenting. Every corner of the house had become a potential site of attack, a theater of fear where the invisible actor dictated terms. Physical marks and injuries became more frequent. Splinters from flying objects scratched skin. Doors slammed against furniture, leaving bruises. Kathy once reported scratches along her arms that appeared without explanation. The house did not merely frighten. It physically interacted with its occupants in a targeted, intelligent manner. George's own body bore the evidence of the presence's power. Fatigue, bruises, and a constant sense of being watched, manipulated, and challenged. Media attention intensified. Journalists visited, documenting the unusual phenomena, interviewing the family, and capturing the growing legend of 112 Ocean Avenue. Audio recordings captured whispers, voices, and strange low-frequency sounds. Photographs revealed subtle distortions, shadows, and anomalies impossible to attribute to lighting or camera error. The house, once private, became a public symbol of terror, a place where ordinary life had been overtaken by forces beyond comprehension. Despite escalating activity, the family's resilience remained remarkable. They adhered to daily routines as best they could, documented every incident meticulously, and sought support from clergy, investigators, and medical professionals. Their journals detailed times, locations, and participants of each event. Photographs captured unusual movement. Audio equipment recorded whispers, groans, and other anomalous sounds. This documentation would later become the foundation of books, films, and ongoing studies of the Amityville haunting. The final week of occupancy brought unprecedented intensity. Doors slammed incessantly, objects flew with extraordinary force, and shadows moved rapidly throughout the house. Green slime emerged in new areas, coating walls, floors, and furniture. Voices became almost constant, taunting, pleading, and threatening. George and Kathy felt as though every moment in the house was orchestrated to erode courage, undermine safety, and induce terror. The children were on the verge of hysteria, sleep-deprived and fearful even during daylight. The family made the decision to leave. Their departure was immediate and urgent. 28 days of terror had reached a threshold beyond endurance. The house, having exacted its toll, seemed to react as they packed. Doors slammed in rapid succession. Shadows stretched across hallways one final time, and the lingering chill filled every room. George, Kathy, and the children fled the property, leaving behind the Dutch colonial, the green slime, and a legacy of fear that would resonate for decades. The story of the Lutz family became instantly legendary. Books were written, films produced, and the house at 112 Ocean Avenue entered popular culture as the most infamous haunted residence in history. Researchers analyzed their records, photographs, and audio recordings, noting patterns of intelligent disturbance, levitation, object manipulation, and psychological impact. The house was more than haunted. It was an environment of sustained terror, testing every aspect of human endurance, perception, and faith. Even years later, the Amityville Horror retains its place as the benchmark for American hauntings. The Lutz family's ordeal demonstrated the convergence of psychological terror, physical manifestations, and intelligent activity in a domestic setting. The house, once a symbol of safety and domestic aspiration, had become a crucible of fear, where ordinary life was impossible and terror was omnipresent. The legacy endures. Reports of supernatural activity, debates over authenticity, and the inspiration of countless books and films. 112 Ocean Avenue remains a cultural touchstone, a place where the extraordinary intruded on the ordinary, where fear became an inescapable companion, and where the Lutz family's month-long nightmare continues to haunt the imagination of generations. The moment the Lutz family left 112 Ocean Avenue, the house seemed to exhale, as if satisfied with the terror it had exacted. Yet the story did not end with their departure. Newspapers, radio shows, and local gossip spread the tale of the green slime, the slamming doors, the shadows, and George Lutz waking at precisely 3:15 a.m. nightly. The once private home had become a public phenomenon, a symbol of fear, and the epicenter of what would become one of the most famous hauntings in history. For the family, life after Amityville was fraught with mixed emotions, relief, lingering fear, and the burden of disbelief from those outside the experience. Friends and neighbors questioned their sanity. Skeptics dismissed the events as exaggeration, a media stunt, or mass hysteria. Yet George and Kathy Lutz were unwavering. The house had been alive with an intelligence, a malice that could not be rationalized. Every detail they documented, journals, photographs, and audio recordings, served as a testament to what they endured. Books soon immortalized the haunting. J. Anson's The Amityville Horror detailed the Lutz family's experiences, blending first-hand accounts with narrative dramatization. Its publication sparked nationwide fascination, selling millions of copies and capturing the public imagination. For the first time, a haunting was not confined to local legend or whispered folklore. It became part of the cultural lexicon. Readers recoiled at descriptions of levitating furniture, green slime, voices in strange languages, and the psychological torment of a family trapped within a house that seemed alive. Film adaptations followed, translating the terror into a visual medium. The Amityville Horror movies, beginning in the late 1970s, dramatized the Lutz family's ordeal, emphasizing the supernatural elements while maintaining the psychological tension that had gripped the family. Cinematic renditions introduced millions to the chilling details. The haunting at 3:15 a.m., objects flying without cause, and shadows stretching across rooms in ways that defied logic. The film cemented the house in popular imagination, transforming it from a real-life nightmare into an enduring horror mythos. The story of the Lutz family also influenced paranormal research and investigation. Scholars and enthusiasts studied the case for its combination of physical manifestations, intelligent activity, and psychological impact. Audio recordings, photographs, and investigator notes were analyzed repeatedly, forming a template for documenting poltergeist phenomena. Unlike purely anecdotal hauntings, the Amityville case provided multiple forms of evidence and corroboration, making it a cornerstone in the study of the paranormal. Yet questions remain. Skeptics continue to debate the authenticity of the events, citing possible embellishments or exaggerations. Paranormal investigators weigh evidence against natural explanations, structural quirks, psychological stress, or environmental factors. The green slime, levitation, and shadows defy scientific explanation. Yet some insist that the Lutz family story is colored by media influence and narrative shaping. Despite skepticism, the experiences of George, Kathy, and their children endure as one of the most detailed accounts of a sustained haunting in history. The Amityville Horror also left a cultural imprint, books and films. It shaped the public's perception of haunted houses, poltergeists, and the supernatural. Phrases like Amityville Horror became shorthand for domestic terror, inspiring generations of horror fiction, television programs, and even real estate cautionary tales. It created a framework in which paranormal activity could be both terrifying and narratively compelling, blending fear, skepticism, and fascination into a story that transcends its geographic origin. For the Lutz family, the events were life-altering. Their month-long ordeal left psychological scars, a deep awareness of the inexplicable, and the knowledge that fear could take tangible form in ways beyond comprehension. Yet their courage in documenting every event, in standing firm against disbelief, and in sharing their story with the world ensured that the haunting would never be forgotten. They became, unwillingly, pioneers of modern paranormal lore, their home transformed from a private residence into a legendary site of horror. Even decades later, 112 Ocean Avenue holds a shadowed reputation. Residents, investigators, and curious visitors often approach with caution. Stories of strange occurrences continue, whether inspired by the Lutz family's account or by the persistent cultural fascination with the house. The Amityville Horror stands as a warning, a narrative that challenges the boundaries between fear, reality, and imagination. It reminds us that sometimes the familiar, a family home, a quiet street, a sunny room, can become a stage for forces beyond understanding. Ultimately, the story of the Lutz family endures because it resonates with a fundamental human fear, the invasion of safety by the unknown. Their experience was more than a series of supernatural events. It was a confrontation with intelligence, malice, and mystery in a domestic setting. The house, the slime, the shadows, and the voices were not merely anecdotes, but elements of a sustained, terrifying experience that reshaped the family's life and left an indelible mark on culture. The Amityville Horror remains a complex intersection of faith, fear, skepticism, and storytelling. It asks questions with no definitive answers. Was the house truly haunted? Were the events amplified by stress, fear, or suggestion? Or did the Lutz family genuinely encounter forces beyond the natural world? The ambiguity is part of the legacy, ensuring that the story continues to provoke debate, inspire horror fiction, and chill the imagination. What remains undeniable is the impact. A family forced to flee their dream home, a neighborhood forever marked by legend, and a world captivated by the narrative of a house that could terrify, manipulate, and dominate the lives of those within its walls. The Amityville Horror is not just a haunting. It is a story of survival, fear, and the enduring power of the unknown. The Lutz family left the house physically, but its presence remains in history, in media, and in the collective imagination. A reminder that some horrors refuse to stay confined within walls, and that the echoes of terror can last a lifetime.